This is the Wellbeing Show with me, Noel McDermott, and my special guest tonight is Dennis Relojo-Howell. Hi, Dennis. Welcome. Dennis is a psychologist who's going to tell you all about himself in a second. But while I've got you, just to sort of welcome you on, you're probably watching this through Facebook, because that's the platform that we're streaming on. And so it'd be lovely to hear from you. If you have any thoughts or suggestions or questions throughout the evening, please do join us, and it would be great to hear from you and to have your thoughts and questions. The other way you can join in is, once I've got this frog out of my throat, is that you can call us. It's live at the moment, unless you're watching it as a podcast later in the week. So if you're watching this on Wednesday evening, and on Wednesday the 13th of May, at around about 9 o'clock UK time, between 9 and 10:30, then it's possible for you to join in the show live. That's why we keep it live during these days. And you can do that by giving me a call on my mobile number. I've got the mobile here, and the number's 07506 319 745. That's 07506 319 745. Be great to have your thoughts and comments, and you can give us a call if you've got some questions for Dennis or myself. We've got James hovering in the background. You won't be able to see him on the feed, but he's there anytime we want to bring him into the show. James is our technician who's here with us this evening. So that number, if you're calling from outside the UK, is +44 7506 319 745. It'd be great to hear from you. And we're going to be talking to Dennis today about his work as a psychologist, and also looking at the importance of the evidence base for psychological interventions. He's a research psychologist as well. He's also got a new book out, which he's going to tell us all about, and he's got a website in which collates very interesting psychological information for people that's available for the public. And he also has a research website. Again, he's going to tell us all about these things. So without further ado, I just want to say, try to figure out which bit of, if I look like that, then I'm sort of looking at you. It's difficult on this online Zoom stuff to know where people are positioned. Hello, Dennis. It's
thanks for having me here, Noel. Yeah, I'll start off with my name because it's a bit tricky to say. So my name is Dennis Relojo-Howell. As you've mentioned, I created this platform called PsychReg, and I collate a bunch of resources on psychology, mental health, and well-being, and it has a scholarly article arm. It has an open access journal called PsychReg Journal of Psychology, and then I also do a bit of what the same as what you're doing. I also on YouTube, where I talk to interesting people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. So that's pretty much what I've been doing for the last 6 years.
Great. Well, it's fantastic to have you with us here. How is it going? Let's just catch up with you personally. How's it going? Sorry if I seem distracted. I'm trying to get my iPad working as well, and so that I can sort of see the comments as they're coming in through Facebook Live, and hopefully respond to people. So please excuse me if I seem a bit distracted. I'm still a bit of a sort of Luddite when it comes to all this technology. I'm not quite sure it works, but I think you're more au fait with it than I am, so you might be better at getting me.
I'm still learning. Yeah, so how am I today? Well, pretty much the same day as usual for the past 2 months, just like everyone else. So just staying at home with my husband, and I'm pretty much spending most of my time on my website, on Netflix, and then occasionally I would read a book, but it's pretty much repetitive now. So I think just like most everyone else, I can't wait for the lockdown to be over so we could have a bit of normalcy with our life. But I would say my life is not really, my lifestyle is not really different from the lockdown, because I'm a freelancer, so most of the time I really work from home. But what makes it really different now is that, you know, there's a bit of restriction to the places that I can visit, and I really miss that. Yeah, but all in all, psychologically and in terms of my well-being, I'm pretty much coping in terms of the current situation.
Okay. And how are you managing to do that? I mean, as a psychologist, what sort of skills are you using that are helping you? Because a lot of people are feeling quite anxious about current situation, finding it quite difficult. But how do you think you're managing to sort of remain balanced and sort of okay within this situation?
Yeah, I think it's got more to do with my personality more than my background in psychology. But of course, there would still be an element of my background in psychology, but it's more to do with my personality because I always look for something positive.
Okay.
And I'm actually quite a funny person in real life. I always try to look for something funny. And I'm also a bit resilient. I think it's got to do with my background, my childhood. So
right.
Yeah, I'm fairly quite doing well.
The positivity and resilience are two.
Yeah, positivity, resilience, and humor, I think.
I think those are two. Those are some really important traits. And you say you think it comes from your sort of childhood. So maybe we can follow through on that. What do you think how do you think you developed this resilience, this positivity, and this humor? Were you born with it, or was it something that your family?
I think the best way to do that is to give you a bit of a texture of my trajectory in life. I grew up from.
Great.
I was born in the Philippines, so I just came here in the country about 7 years ago. So I spent my childhood in the slum in the Philippines, just to give you an idea of what the kind of place I grew up with. So we did not have a toilet. We didn't have a running water. We didn't have electricity when I was 10. So it was a completely different life. So I think that kind of shaped my how I perceive my life. You know, like if you can't really live with those basic necessities, I think there are far worse things in life. When I always encounter something like challenging in life, I just always remind myself of my childhood, of how I grew up and how my parents managed to raise 3 children. So I think at an early age, my parents instilled to me the value of resilience and the value of positivity, and always try to improve your situation. So
you grew up in a slum, you say?
Yeah, I grew up in a slum in the Philippines.
Okay. Not your typical place where you'd expect somebody to have resilience and sense of humor and positivity.
I think the sense of humor is a bit ingrained in the Filipino culture. I don't know if you're familiar about the Philippines, but it's quite a disaster-prone country. We always have typhoon, we always have earthquake, but the Filipino people is known for always seeing, I wouldn't say the funny side, but rather the bright side of the situation. And I think that kind of, you know, that kind of ability allows the Filipino people to flourish, to thrive in spite of the situation. And I think I have acquired that skill, that ability. And then in terms of resilience, it's something that I had because of my parents. Especially my mom. I've seen her grit, I've seen her determination.
Yeah. And they sort of instilled those sort of qualities into you.
Yeah, they've instilled that to me because my parents did not have a formal education. So they instilled on the 3 children that you always have to persevere, you always have to value education, because if you want to live, if you want to come out of this slum, that's what they told us at a young age, well, you have to study hard. And so my parents, I'm very proud of what my parents have done to us. All her 3 children have master's degree. One is doing a PhD. So in spite of, you know, the scarcity of resources, they managed to raise us very well.
It's an extraordinary story, Dennis.
Thank you.
So it's really impressive. I mean, really impressive in terms of your parents and the sort of commitment that they had to sort of raising you up, which is not unusual. My parents come from very humble background as well, and they sort of wanted us to have a better life than they had. I think that's, that's quite common. But let's talk about resilience and what that looks like and what your understanding of it, because I think it's quite an important theme at the moment around the world about sort of what resilience means. So can you talk us through what you understand, both personally maybe and also professionally?
Yeah,
resilience.
Yeah, resilience is, in a nutshell, is our ability to bounce back. So yeah, life is not really, as cliche as it may sound, it's not really a walk in the park. It's not really meant to, everything's not going to be enjoyable. And we always have, we would always encounter life events that would challenge our emotion, that would challenge our ability to cope. And when we're able to bounce back, when we're able to still thrive and flourish, even though we encountered some setbacks, that is resilience. It's not because we're physically strong, or it's not because we're emotionally strong, but we have that inner desire to recover from what we've experienced. And yeah, that's my whole understanding of what resilience is.
And is it something that we're either born with, or can we learn it? Is it
I wouldn't say that we're born with it. Actually, your question reminds me of a recent interview that I've done on my podcast. I was talking to a mental health expert from University of Edinburgh, and I understand you also had him, Dr. Mark Halterhoff from Edinburgh.
Oh, Mark, yes, he was amazing.
Yeah. And I also interviewed him on my podcast, and he said that I love the kind of analogy that he said. Not everyone is actually born with good physique, but it's something that we could improve on. And I follow the same analogy when it comes to resilience. It's something that we could work on. And I think it's something to do with, being exposed to a lot of challenging setbacks and discovering that you can actually recover from it. I think that's one thing that we could improve our levels of resilience.
Okay. And how would you say you're resilient? How do you know that you're resilient as a sort of a measure? How do you say it in yourself?
I would say that I'm resilient because it doesn't really, I don't easily get, shall we say, affected by situations.
Right.
It takes a lot before I would be affected. I easily cope with job loss, with death in the family.
Right.
Yeah.
So you take those things in your stride and you keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I guess it's sort of quite a useful skill at the moment to be sort of help people think about the sort of things that might build resilience in an individual. If we think about going to that resilience gym, as it were, I think Mark's idea of you go to the gym to build your physique. If we went to the resilience gym, what sort of equipment is there and what sort of things do we need to do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I like the idea of resilience gym. I think what we would have to have in a resilience toolkit is, hearing lived experience of people who've actually encountered traumatic events and how they actually cope with it. And I think that's the best way to, harness our ability to be resilient, learning from other people's experience. And also, if someone like a mental health professional yourself is trying to help us realize that actually it's not really that bad, you can actually recover from this. And with the help of mental health professional, I think we can able to, bolster a level of resilience. And I think what we can learn from this talk about, resilience is that it's something that we could really cultivate.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that we could actually benefit from this lockdown, for lack of a better word, is that, it's time for us to discover certain aspects of ourselves, whether it's resilience, whether it's actually learning a new habit or learning a new hobby, or just finding out some strengths within you.
So that's about sort of reframing the experience, I guess. Yeah,
reframing the experience and just trying to make good use of your time during the lockdown.
Have you made good use of your time? I don't want to put you on the spot, but have there been any goals that you've had yourself that you would be interested in?
Yes, I'm actually, I've finished reading a book that I've been putting off on hold for quite some time. That's something. And I've done a few things on my website that I've always wanted to do, and just I'm trying to watch a few Spanish language lessons on YouTube, because that's always something that also also want to improve my Spanish skills.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions that are coming up in the commentary, which I might bring up. I just want to make a note for people who are watching. There's a bit of a time lag between writing things and us being able to see it, and then us answering. It's all a bit sort of trippy, time traveling stuff that's happening at the moment. So I'll get your questions and then I'll sort of put them to people. But one of the things I would like to ask is that for people who are watching and listening in, is thinking about this topic of resilience and what Dennis has just said about, you know, setting yourself goals within this lockdown, and that being something that can foster resilience, and which is, you know, something that we all know sort of psychologically is correct, that seeing sort of something positive that you can aim for. So I'd be really interested in knowing what sort of goals that the people who are watching this evening's broadcast set themselves, if any, during lockdown. Of course, a goal might be just to give yourself a break and not having goals. That's perfectly reasonable as well. But I'd be really interested throughout the show if people were sort of either phone in or just in the comments section on Facebook, let us know. We have a variety of people watching us, and one of them is Goldie Blake, who's just brought up an issue that I think that you might like to talk about, which is around inherited trauma, because you were just talking, weren't you, Dennis, about the sort of having grown up in the Philippines and this idea that the quite a potentially traumatic events were happening in your childhood, and that your parents and your culture were used to these types of sort of natural disasters that may have or may not have produced trauma in people. So we might begin to talk about inherited trauma later. So just to say, Goldie, thanks for the question. I'm going to come back to that. I want to continue though for a little while on this teasing out of Dennis some of these ideas about resilience and the resilience toolkit. And sort of really maybe going into that a little bit more. So thinking about resilience, one of the things I think about is I think about maybe in three areas. There's sort of cognitive skills and physiological, emotional skills, and then there's social skills. Because of those three elements that might be sort of looked at in terms of the types of areas that we want to work on. As a psychologist, I guess you understand this notion of cognitive restructuring. It's a very common thing in cognitive behavioral therapy. And you've begun to talk about it just in terms of your life experience. So you've just talked about reframing experiences so that you don't have to see them. What are the types of cognitive sort of tricks do you think that are quite useful? I'm thinking about some of the things around balanced thinking, for example, issues around that and how people might challenge their thinking. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the power of our thoughts and the sort of impact that they have upon us. So one of the things I'm thinking is that having depressive, anxious or traumatizing thoughts and the impact upon them on ourselves and what those, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit, because it seems to me you don't go into those types of that way of thinking. You stay with the thinking which allows you to be flexible in your cognitive styles. So what would you say about that in terms of sort of the types of skills and thought and ideas that people might get into?
Yeah, I think I'll link that with what you mentioned earlier about inherited trauma. If you try to look back at what happened to your life and try to reframe it, let's say, you know that there's a common expression like, it could have been worse, and I think that's a common strategy that we could use. That is, it could have been worse. It could have been, you know, I could have been dead. Something worse could have happened, but instead I'm still alive, and I still have the chance to improve my life. And I think that's one way that we can actually reframe our mind and try to look back at what you said, inherited trauma. I think I'll set myself as an example. you know, like when I talk to people that I grew up in the slum, and then we don't have running water, we don't have electricity. Looking back, as a child, I don't really see it as a problem. My parents of course, my parents would see it as a problem, but as a child, you just see it as a fact of life. Yeah, you don't have electricity, you don't have running water, but yeah, you're enjoying, you know, playing with your kids, you're enjoying playing with your neighbors. So I think that's one way to, you know, restructure, to reframe your thinking of a potentially traumatic experience.
Okay. So looking at how you can then go back on some of your previous experiences, and with your current sort of understanding of things, begin to sort of question the old narrative and challenge some of that. So that's a really good idea for people. Thinking about other sort of issues around resilience, thinking about the sort of social support and the community support that might exist for people, because obviously that's been quite challenged for people at the moment in terms of, but what sort of skills and abilities might people bring in that range, do you think?
What people can actually, I think I would like to emphasize again the importance of, you know, listening from other people's stories, because there's a power in storytelling, you know, like when you listen to people's stories of recovery, of resilience, of flourishing from a traumatic experience, then you learn from them. And also, instead of, you know, there's a psychological concept called rumination. When you're dwelling too much, what could have gone wrong, or what if I don't manage to survive this situation? And that's actually increasing your anxiety and depression levels, and that's not really a good way of, you know, coping with what you're struggling with. And I think that the role of mental health professionals, the psychotherapists and counselors, has never been important in situations like this, because you are there to help people highlight that actually you could actually turn this around as an opportunity. Right. You could, you know, it's an opportunity for you to prove your skills. It's an opportunity for you to improve your skills, improve your life.
Yeah, so that's maybe bringing in some of these ideas from positive psychology, that if you work with difficult situations and begin to see sort of opportunities and gratitude and ways to grow, that somehow you ameliorate or reduce the potential traumatic impact on people. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And it seems that, I mean, I'm thinking about sort of the culture that you come from, coming from a culture which maybe, you know, had many really positive coping skills and strategies. It seems that there's something going on about how people talk about the experience of these potentially traumatic events in these natural disasters, and how they're processed, not just on an individual level, but almost on a community level, it seems.
Yeah, and I would say so. And I would also, I also think that there's an element of religiosity involved, because Philippines is a really religious country. It's like 90% a Catholic country. So there's an element of, you know, it's an act of God. When something happens, like a volcanic eruption, an earthquake, flooding, it's always an act of God. And I don't think that really translates into this country. You know, we won't call coronavirus or pandemic an act of God, but we always try to attribute it to something, you know, something natural. And yeah, like in cultures like the Philippines, religion really plays an important role. I'm an atheist, by the way, but because of religion, you try to, you know, you try to let someone more powerful and more capable than you to, you know, to lead your life. And I think that's one thing that why Filipinos tend to survive the struggles that they face, the disasters that they encounter. And also,
sounds like, somehow it sounds like that having this sort of belief in this larger thing means that you can depersonalize it in a sense.
Yeah, and also the belief in afterlife, you know, like also, I'm not familiar with the Indian culture, and I think that's why also some Indians entertain the idea of reincarnation because you might be struggling in this current situation, but in afterlife, when you become reincarnated, then who knows what will happen.
So this I mean, I think there's evidence for this as well, that this sense in which that people who hold a belief in something bigger than themselves, but if we make it broader than religion, it might be sort of spiritual conceptions, or it might be an attachment to belief in the healing power of nature or the universe or something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a religious, but there's there is quite a lot of evidence that people who have a sense that something is bigger than themselves tend to manage things like anxiety, depression, trauma more effectively, and it has a reduced impact upon them.
And also that's also got something to do with you just mentioned about evidence, and this reminds me of a research about the link between religiosity and suicide, and a number of research has shown that those people who have religious belief, they tend not to commit suicide, and that's why in Southeast Asian countries where they're heavily religious, compared that to European countries where a number of people don't hold religious belief, they're more likely to commit suicide. And that's one way of showing that an element of religiosity, an element of belief to a higher divine being can actually be a good coping mechanism. So that's one, religiosity, and another is humor, because humor is a way for you to try to I wouldn't say invalidate the seriousness of the issue, but you try to diminish the issue in a much healthier way.
Well, I think humor, doesn't it? It acts to enable us again to sort of depersonalize, but also to get a bigger picture on something.
Exactly.
I mean, literally, humor is great in that if we laugh, we de-stress. So that's always a good idea. And I remember, when I was still new in the profession and I was working on boards sort of that were quite challenging places to be, gallows humor, and we would, the professionals would have humorous conversations at the end of the day. And it was a great way to de-stress, but it also gave us a bigger picture because we can become very intensely attached to things. I want to sort of begin to pursue this idea of sort of evidence-based things, but maybe make a point which we're alluding to but not making specifically, but I want to make, is that we can tend to think there's an opposition between modern psychological thinking and ancient thinking. And actually there isn't any sort of opposition, but there is an issue about evidence, and maybe we can talk about evidence-based practice a little bit, because I know that it's a very sort of important issue to you, but certainly in sort of modern psychological thinking does encompass sort of ways of thinking, ways of being. It does have an understanding about different approaches and different ways of thinking about human experience. It's not, as people might think, it's not just a very narrow band. It's quite a broad thing of human interest, and often I think psychology follows the interests of the individual psychologist like yourself. And it is enriched, the field is enriched by people bringing in their own personal and cultural experience. But it's not heavily dominated by one cultural perspective. But you've begun to talk about evidence, and I know this is a conversation that you and I had in our catch-up before the show, and you're very sort of keen, I think, on that when we do sort of psychological interventions and psychotherapy, that we do it from an evidence-based perspective. What does that mean to you, an evidence-based perspective?
An evidence-based perspective is one that involves quantitative analysis of the construct in psychology. So let's say, for instance, you want to examine whether a specific intervention actually works in, let's say, alleviating symptoms of depression and anxiety. Then you really have to examine it using softwares and using valid methodology, and you have to run an experiment. And now contrast that with, let's say, a qualitative analysis where you're just relying on the lived experience of the individual and taking everything from that point of view. And I'm more leaning towards the side of, trying to quantify the behavior, but I'm not saying that that's the only way and that's the right way to approach human behavior, because as cliche as it may sound, because we're studying human behavior, and studying human behavior is not something that you could really contain in a box. It's not like atoms, it's not like molecules, you're not studying DNA. So, that so many different elements when you're talking about human behavior, when you're talking about lived experience. You've mentioned earlier about the impact of culture and the impact of course, your childhood experience, and that's something that you can't really easily quantify. But the reason why I'm in favor of a more quantitative take on studying human behavior is that it allows us to be more objective. It's difficult to be objective in social science because it's not really like physical science, and we always have disagreements. Even in politics, we have disagreements. So more so in studying human behavior, we would have disagreements on what's the best way to approach it. But I think ultimately, a main goal is that, to improve our live experience, to improve how we deal with other people and how we interact with people. So ultimately, it's not really a question of which approach is best or which approach is better. It's just a matter of, interpretation.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. We go back to the sort of beginning of psychology and psychotherapy, some of the big names like Freud and Jung, etc. Very much their work was based upon sort of individual cases from which they would then make massive generalizations. And there are obviously certain problems with that. Because Freud, for example, was dealing with, often very highly educated, upper middle class, almost aristocratic Viennese nationals, and I would question how much of their experience, lived experience, is similar to, say, for somebody like yourself who grew up in very humble backgrounds. And so this is, I guess, where what you're talking about comes into its fore, which is looking at the actual numbers and whether they stack up, because it does seem slightly odd to try and build a whole theory of psychotherapy and human nature based upon a handful of cases. So what would be sort of modern sort of numbers that we're dealing with in terms of getting a good evidence base for psychological interventions? What would it look like? In Freud's day, it was one case. Write a book about it and then everybody go, wow, that's amazing. So this is the way human beings are. What sort of study, what sort of methodologies are used now? What sort of numbers are involved in creating a study? Just give us some idea about that.
Yeah, but basically, what people tend to do now is they trying to run from a quantitative point of view. What people tend to do, what experimenters tend to do rather, is they run an experiment, they compare it with one group, they compare it with a treatment group. A treatment group is someone that receives an intervention, and then they compare it with another group. So basically that's it, and then you try to run it with some statistical software. Commonly used would be SPSS, and then you try to, quantitatively analyze it, whether how effective a certain intervention is. Now contrast that with Freud, where of course Freud, I'm not a big fan of Freud, but we have to credit Freud for pioneering the idea that behavior could be analyzed, and we have to give him credit for that. That's what his major contribution is in psychology. Whether we're a big fan of his defense mechanism or the Oedipus complex that he proposed, that's another matter. But I think Freud was also a product of his time, because he lived during the Victorian times. So statistics was not really as sophisticated as it is now. So you just have to rely on observation. And basically that's what he was doing. He's relying on observation and trying to analyze the past experiences of the individuals. But whereas now we tend to be more sophisticated with our analysis, and we try to be objective. So we have sophisticated softwares now that we use to, to quantify our observations.
Yeah.
And of course, Freud's ideas are not, they're not really outweighed over quantitative take on behavior. We still have psychoanalysis, we still have psychodynamic counseling, which is pretty much hinged on the idea of Freud. And yeah, it's just a different take, really. For some people, it works for them, talking to a psychodynamic counselor, whereas for some, they prefer a more, shall we say, a scientific approach. That's why they would rather take medication, or they would rather look for a specific intervention to...
Yeah, and we're not going to open up that whole debate. I mean, there's still big debates going on, and sort of people can have that argument. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there are other modern versions of psychodynamic thinking, like interpersonal psychotherapy, which is, again, much more evidence-based. We use those types of... but I guess the big shift, if we think about the big shifts in psychology and psychotherapy over the years, the big shift was the move from these more personal history-based forms of interventions to interventions that are much more based on the here and now. And that tends to be the two big distinctions, I guess, that goes on. And then there are various forms of therapy, like cognitive analytic therapy, for example, which tries to marry both approaches and somehow make a blend that works really well. So, but just thinking about the early days of psychotherapy and now the current days of psychological therapies, and looking at that a bit. So you've mentioned it a little bit, that sort of Freudian and post-Freudian thought was very much about the influence of one's personal history and upbringing and how that affected current behavior. That the treatment methodology was about, if we could understand those influences, somehow we could stop them or change them. Is that correct? Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about inherited trauma, and I think that ties with it, like your early childhood experiences, especially the traumatic experiences that will carry over to your adult, how you tend to react with the situations. And I think that's a very fitting example. And so the psychodynamic approach, the psychoanalytic approach, I think that would be the best way to deal with that, to help the clients deal with their current experiences.
Right, and it's an interesting. And then we had the big, with Aaron Beck, big shift in psychological therapy into things like cognitive behavioral therapy, for example. And again, I'm not going to sort of get into the debate about which one's right and wrong. I don't think they're in opposition. I think it's all an ongoing story in many ways, and it's really important that we sort of maintain that story. But the big shift, I guess, with cognitive behavioral therapy was very much looking at current presentation of symptoms and working with that current presentation of symptoms rather than necessarily going back in time. And what was the evidence for that in terms of how that works and why that works, do you think?
I think the reason for that, I'm not a chartered psychologist, and I'm not a trained counselor, but I think that the reason why it works is that you're trying to help people put into perspective what they're capable of doing, and in relation to what they've experienced. And you're trying to highlight that you have this ability, because some people were able to do it, so you can also do it. And that's also of course, in conjunction with other therapies. So I think that's, the big shift that you just mentioned to earlier. It's not just, just talking about your earlier experiences, but, trying to contextualize it with your experience and the availability of resources. And of course, the support of mental health professionals. And I think that's really a nice, phase that the area of psychology has already, achieved as a field, because it was able to, it was able to pick out the good bits from the earlier contributions of psychologists and mental health professionals.
Yeah, and I suppose there's something about when we start to do larger studies that involve large numbers of people, then we can begin to draw conclusions that may have more validity across the whole range of people. So, and again, I think thinking about this idea of resilience, and whether it's something that you have or you don't have, or you can learn or you can't learn. I guess from the early days of psychotherapy, very much based upon your childhood experience, almost determined you in many ways. Whereas I suppose these days in modern sort of psychotherapies, we'd very much say that, of course, it doesn't determine you. It has an influence, but the actions and the things that you do right here and now will determine the way you're going to be in many ways.
Because the earlier, of course, the early ideas in psychology is always rooted on the idea of whether it's nature or nurture, as in the case of, say, for instance, other traits, shall we say? Let's say, for instance, intelligence. We still don't agree whether it's something which is, you're already born with, or something that you could improve it. And I'm talking about the IQ. And probably that's the same thing with, resilience. Is it something that we're really born with, or is something that we develop throughout the life course? And but I think the important thing that mental health professionals can do is just try to help individuals really thrive and flourish. Whether it's nature or nurture, it's really irrelevant, because our end goal is just to help people lead a better life than what they would have.
And let's come on to the thriving and flourishing. Before we do that, I just want to take a little break just to remind people this is a live show. We've had some great interventions so far from people, and it'd be really lovely to hear from you if you have some questions, and send them through to us. I think that there are 2 watch parties going on. So if I've got a watch party going on, but I think also Teresa has started a watch party, so she may have questions on her watch party. So just to let you know, Teresa, if you do, I can't see your watch party, so you'll need to get those questions and comments over to me, and maybe join our watch party as well. But it's great to have more than one party going on at the same time. I'm all for diversity. So it'd be lovely to have your comments. The other way you can join in is that you can give us a call. And it'd be great if you decided to join in by phone. The number to get us on is 07506 319 745. That's 07506 319 745. And maybe somebody can put that into the comments section on Facebook, so that people can see the number. If you're calling from abroad, it's +44, of course. So +44 7506 319 745. So it'd be great to have your comments and your questions. I've got Dennis with me. Hello, Dennis. It's great to have you. Dennis is a psychologist.
Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you on. You're a doctor of all things. You're Dr. Dennis, is that what I call
No,
it?
I'm not a doctor. I've actually did a master's degree. I'm still toying on the idea whether to do a PhD or not, but I might do. Yeah.
Because interestingly, you got involved in psychology. You've always been interested in psychology, I think you told me.
Straight when I went to uni, I did psychology straight away, and then I did a master's degree in psychology, and then I did another master's degree in psychology. So I have 2 master's degrees in psychology. But right now, what I'm doing is managing a psychology platform.
And so tell us a little bit about that psychology platform, and we'll come back to the discussion and what's involved in that psychology platform.
So my website is called PsychReg. It's basically just I'm publishing all sorts of articles within the themes of psychology, mental health, and well-being. It has a podcast which is hosted by 2 Americans, and they're clinical psychologists, Dr. Bernie Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. They're based in Florida. So that's one arm of PsychReg. Another arm is an academic journal. It's called PsychReg Journal of Psychology. And I also organize conferences, mental health events, more recently, I was in Malaysia in October. I've organized a 3-day conference. So that's basically the nature of my job.
And so your idea is to create this platform. Is it for professionals or for the public? Who is the intended audience?
My intended audience is really the general public. So that's why a lot of the writing style on PsychReg is really, it's more modest form of writing. So we tend not to use jargon. And a lot of articles on PsychReg is also about mental health stories. I encourage people to publish their mental health stories, stories of recovery, stories of hope and resilience. And more recently, we've been publishing a number of stories relating to the experience of the lockdown. Sure. And my ultimate goal here is to provide a resource which everyone can relate to. And my ambitious goal is to be one of the most visited psychology website in the world. I know I'm quite a long way from it, but I'll do it one blog post at a time.
Well, we need lots more spaces where people can get hold of, good materials to be able to think about. It's articles and videos, or just articles?
For the websites, mainly articles, and then you will also find us on YouTube. There's a podcast, and I also do a series of interviews on my YouTube channel, and then. For the more academic side, for the researchers, I have PsychReg Journal of Psychology, where I publish research-based articles.
And what's your sort of YouTube channel called, just in case people want to find it?
My YouTube channel is called The DRH Show. So the best way to find me is just to punch in my name on YouTube, Dennis Relojo-Howell.
Yeah. Great. And then people will find your channel, and they'll have these amazing free resources, which are the sort of interviews that you're doing with people.
Yeah, I interview people at least twice a week. So I interview all sorts of people within the field of psychology and mental health, from academics to those people who have lived experience, and just people who are basically interested about the theme of psychology and mental health. And it's also a way for me to engage within the wider community. So it's nice.
I was wondering about that. Is that quite an important issue for you, this idea of reaching out broader than just within the psychological community?
Yeah, because I love hearing people's stories, and I love listening to people's idea, whether it's psychology or not. And it's a way of it's a way of educating myself. And I also love to interview people who I idolize.
Right. Who's your current idols, so that we all know and we can go find them?
Okay, I've recently interviewed the president of the Canadian Psychological Association. I interviewed him 3 days ago, and I like his name is Dr. Ian Nicholson, and the reason why I invited to interview him is that I really like how he tries to diversify his area. He's not just focused on academia, but he's also focused on having his own private practice, and that's on top of managing a psychological association. So I've invited him. I've got lots of people that I also want to interview. I'm a big fan of Dr. Jordan Peterson, Dr. Gadsad. I also want to interview him.
And is there a particular area of psychology at the moment, apart from the research, of course, but is there a particular area that you're interested in personally at the moment?
Yeah, for my research project, when I was doing my MSc, I did a research project on expressive writing. So that's something that I'm really interested about. In layman's term, basically, expressive writing is the idea that when you write something, when you express yourself in writing, it allows you to make sense of what's happening in your life, and as a result, you can better manage your coping mechanism. And that ties
the thing that some people call narrative therapy. Is that
narrative. It comes with different. It comes in different terms. Some people call it journaling. Some people call it journal therapy, narrative therapy, expressive writing, or writing therapy. And in my case, as a blogger, for someone who runs a blog, I'd like to extend my earlier research, the benefits of running a mental health blog. And some mental health charities already have advocated for it. Mind actually runs a blog where they just invite people to share their mental health stories, and because according to Mind, it allows people to to make sense of what's happening to them. It allows them to cope effectively and positively with what's happening to them, and that's something that I'd love to explore in the future. How blogs can actually help people. And when we're talking about blogs, sometimes we're just limited to people who blog in English, because a lot of blogs is, of course, based in English. So I'd like to find out how people in non-English speaking countries, what's their idea about blogging and coping.
Yeah, I was saying, I mean, it's a comment that's coming up in the Facebook feed anyway, but I want to bring it to you, is the sort of the whole question about whether we should be placing personal and psychological material in these types of public spheres. So this is a live broadcast on Facebook Live, and in the research conversation that you and I had prior to this, we talked at quite some length about it raises personal issues and how you felt about that. And one of the things that we discussed and that I talked to you about is the idea that we all have to manage our own boundaries around these things and make sure that we feel safe. And I'd said to you in the conversation, if something, is there anything that you're not comfortable talking about? And you said, no, I'm pretty open. And I said to you, well, if something does come up that you feel uncomfortable about, you should just say, I don't want to talk about that. Yeah. That's always, and then if that it hasn't happened yet in all the guests I've had on. We've been running the show for over a year now. As yet, nobody has said, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that. It's uncomfortable. It makes me feel too vulnerable." But if somebody did, my reaction would be that, "Oh, fantastic! Thanks for telling us that," because that's about holding safe personal boundaries, which is really important. What's your take on us being in these types of environments as psychologists, as individuals, talking about these types of issues? Why do you think it might be a benefit, and what are the risks, do you think?
The benefit of it, because from what I've encountered, publishing mental health stories from individuals, that they realize they're not on their own. They're not the only one who's suffering from depression. They're not the only one who have suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts. And when they realize that actually they've actually recovered with proper support and with proper intervention. So I think that it's important to highlight those stories. And the way I do it is I invite people. I never force people. And if they want to be anonymous, they can remain anonymous. I think it's important to highlight those stories, because a lot of the times when we talk about mental health, we always tend to focus on the negative aspect of mental health. But when we try to focus on, the story of recovery and the story of, getting the right support and getting the right intervention, that's also important to highlight as well. I'd like to share to you the story of my friend who's based in New York, Maxwell Guttman. He's a prolific contributor to PsychReg. He's been, I think I can share this because he's been quite open with this. He has a lived experience of psychosis and schizophrenia, but with the right support, he was able to manage his symptoms. And his story is very inspiring, because after that ordeal of having schizophrenia, he's now teaching at Fordham University in New York. He's an academic, and that's really an inspiring story. And he's been very vocal about his experience, and he talks about it on one of my interviews on YouTube. We talk about his experience, and the reason why he keeps on talking about it is just to inspire people. And you know, it's not just it's a serious experience. You know, having schizophrenia, you're hearing voices, you're having hallucinations, and you have to take antipsychotic medication. But with the support of his parents, I met him in person. He's actually one of the speakers at the conference that I've organized in London 2 years ago, and he really delivered a powerful lecture.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stories that I'm trying to promote on my website.
Yeah. And I remember sort of when I still worked in the NHS, this is going back a while, because I'm quite old, and they were asking managers who had experience of mental health or mental illness if they were willing to share their stories, on the basis that if leaders in an organisation were open to those issues, it might encourage other people in the workforce in the organisation to come forward and say that they were struggling. And the idea being that the sooner somebody gets help with encouragement, the sooner that we can deal with the problem. And usually the more effective the interventions are. So that's one of the things. But I guess it's sort of thinking about the differences between, say, a program like this and maybe Jerry Springer. And what might be the differences going on, and thinking about them. I guess one of the things for me is that you know, we had that conversation before the show went up, which was to check what was safe for you to talk about. And so we talked about safety and boundaries. And one of the other things I think that is important about this type of shows, I mean, I generally tend to invite on professionals in the field. And I use it professionals in the field in a broad sense, because I also invite on skilled amateurs, as it were, people who are leading charities, etc., who have lived experience and they have processed that lived experience. But I guess the question that's come up in the Facebook feed, which I think is a very good question, is this therapy that we're doing right now, or is it something else? What would be your thinking?
I think what we're doing right now is making discussions about mental health relevant and accessible. And I think that's really important. When we're not trying to replace the information that you can access on mental health charities or big psychological organizations, but we're trying to make it more digestible. We're trying to make it more accessible, because we don't have to, you know, we don't have to pretend that a lot of the resources that we can access, let's say, for instance, in British Psychological Society, that the way informations are presented is not really written in modest language. It's more accessible for people with who are in academia, who are researchers. But I think we're just trying to offer the same information, but we're presenting it in a more you know, accessible, modest, digestible way. And I think it's important. And just like what we've said earlier, there are different approaches to mental health, and that goes the same with, you know, conversations about mental health. So some people may prefer a more professional, more formal discussions and conversations about mental health, but some people want it to be more personalized, just like what we're doing right now. It's more conversational, where it's like talking to a friend.
Absolutely. And I do think of you as more of a friend, Dennis, having worked with you on Men's Radio Station, and having had your amazing skills in terms of promoting the show. But there's two questions that have now come up, and I want to give to you. But one of the questions is, I guess, around this idea that, you know, we are sharing personal material, for example. And the questioner is sort of surprised and saying, why are you sharing personal material? Surely that's what you do with your therapist. You don't do that on a show like this. So is this therapy that we're doing right now, do you think, or is it something else?
I wouldn't call it a therapy, because for me, therapy is something that should be done in private, in confidence, because if you're if this would be therapy, there's some things that, you know, that should be kept between you and the therapist. I think what we're doing right now is more of a friendly chat, shall we say, a friendly chat which just happens to be devoted about experience and mental health. but you don't have to take everything at, shall we say, at face value. You don't have to take everything as a professional advice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting, isn't it? Thinking about the different types of boundaries that people have.
Yeah.
So, given, I guess it's a bit of a sort of occupational hazard of me. I've spent many years in the psychotherapy profession, and I tend to be very open about things as a consequence. And some people, I think, find that quite odd. I have very intimate conversations with people very quickly. I start talking about feelings, etc., etc. And so people can feel like that's therapy when I don't think it is. I think it's a therapist talking, which may at times feel like therapy, and it is. And it's something that my friends have said to me. I mean, I think it's a really interesting question that the person's brought up. It's something when I remember a friend of mine once said, we were sitting in the kitchen having dinner, and she said, "I'm not one of your bloody patients, Noel."
Yeah. I think it's important to highlight that, a therapist talking is not a talking therapy. It's not a form of talking therapy. It's just, another professional who happens to be talking.
It's just somebody who can't hold professional boundaries very well, maybe.
Yeah.
Another question that's come up, which I think is a really good question, is that do you have suggestions? Does Dennis have suggestions on how people get involved in starting healthy conversations around mental health?
I think the first step towards any conversation, whether it's mental health or not, is just be honest about it. Be honest about your experience. And that's my same approach about managing my platform. I'm different from most of the mental health bloggers because I don't have a lived experience, and I'm not saying that that's having a lived experience is the best approach, but yeah, I'm just being honest. Sometimes I tell them that I don't really understand how it is to have depression. I don't understand how it is to have anxiety because I don't have any of those experience. That's the first thing, be honest. And secondly is, I think, to be open to the idea of what would be the feedback of people. It's like, talking to a psychotherapist. When you open up to a psychotherapist about your experience, about your mental health issues, what's going to happen? You have to be open about it. Yeah, honesty and being prepared.
So not seeing the feedback as some sort of attack, that you've done something wrong.
No, because I don't think that psychotherapists, by and large, on the merit of their role, they're meant to attack you. They might give you some feedback, but you don't have to take it as a criticism. But I think that the role of mental health professionals is just to try to identify where you are and help you to get to where you should be.
And I guess so this is my experience, maybe some of my experience as well is useful to think about in answering the question. I think, one of the things that, having spent many years sort of having private conversations with people as a therapist, as a clinician, sort of, and then holding those boundaries and make sure I don't let that spill. I've also spent many years, like you, in these types of spaces, talking about therapeutic things. And it's a very different experience to the private experience of therapy itself. So talking about these types of things, and one of the experiences I have, and I don't know if you have it as well, is that it can trigger reactions in people. And that can happen simply by their watching and listening to a conversation about difficult issues such as trauma, such as depression, such as anxiety, such as difficult life experiences. That could be triggering to other experiences that people have had. Is that something you've come across as well?
I've never come across with that, but I'm mindful that that there's a possibility that a lot of my resources that I publish could be triggering to some people. That's why I always signpost them to charities, mental health charities, and every article in Psychotherapy always had a disclaimer that not because you find something on the internet, take it as something that could replace professional mental health advice. And I always say to people that the thing that you see on PsychReg is mainly for information purposes only, and that's similar to most of the things that you see on the internet. It's mainly there for information purposes only. And if you really think that you are in serious need of mental health professional advice, then you should go to a mental health professional. That's why what I do on PsychReg is I run a directory of mental health professional. That to be included on that directory is free. So I always have a disclaimer that if you need a mental health professional after reading this article, here's a directory of mental health professionals that you could speak to. And that's the same thing that I do on my YouTube channel. When on the video description box, I always say that this interview should not replace advice from a mental health professional. If you need help, go to this website.
Great tips there, Dennis. Really, really great tips. So be open, be honest about your own experience, your own limitations as well, whatever your experience is. Be authentic about your own experience, I guess, as well as being honest, being authentically you, not justifying or rationalizing or explaining yourself away, but just this is me. And then make sure that you have backup should people be upset or disturbed by the material, so be able to signpost them in the appropriate direction. We've got a comment from Goldie Blake, which is an interesting comment. I wonder what you think about this. She says, therapy requires humility. She doesn't really say who has to have the humility. I'm assuming she means the therapist, because I'm a therapist, but maybe she means patient as well. Maybe she means, I'm not sure which one she means, but let's talk about that idea for both before we go into a little break again.
Yeah, I love the idea that that it requires therapy requires humility. It requires humility from the standpoint of the client, because like in a way you're allowing yourself to be scrutinized by another person, and that takes a lot of humility. That you're offering yourself to a stranger on what they should do, and that's very it requires a lot of humility. And also to be a counselor, that requires humility, because you should not treat your client as an inferior because they're asking for your help. But I think you have to realize that when you're in the position of a mental health professional, that you're not above them, but you're just actually you just happen to have the experience, the knowledge, but you're not in any way superior to the other person. Yeah, so that's a good point from Goldie Blake.
Yeah, that's lovely. So the idea is that we're having an adult conversation.
Yeah, an adult-to-adult conversation.
Right. Yeah. And then one adult has maybe some particular skills and experiences that are useful, hopefully useful, because the other one is paying for them. So that they are useful and professionally. Okay, great. Thanks for that. So I just want to remind people, this is a live show. We're going out through Facebook Live. It'd be great for you to join us. In the next few weeks, we will be moving on to more platforms, so it won't just be on Facebook Live, it'll be on LinkedIn and other platforms as well simultaneously, so that we can get into a broader audience. But we're in the process, like a lot of people, of just catching up with all the technical stuff that we need to do. And James, who's the technician working on this, who's quietly sort of humming in the background somewhere, is looking at all of those. So hopefully we'll begin to meet a broader audience. And obviously these broadcasts are then available via the website, noelmcdermott.net. You can go on there and access them. And they'll be available to sort of stream, and we'll place them all on the YouTube channel we've got, which is again just my name, Noel McDermott, and you can sort of see them and see if they're useful and if they're helpful. I think they are. And we've got over a year's worth of stuff now, so we've got some quite a catalogue now of things that we can offer to people. Now, like you, Dennis, I'm very keen to have these spaces and have them grow. So it'd be lovely to hear from you this evening about sort of your thoughts, experiences and comments on what we've been discussing this evening. And also you can call us if you wish. It's great because this bit is live. Obviously, if you're streaming this after the event, don't call us because that's my number and it might be an inconvenient time for me. But if it's on a Wednesday evening, for this particular show, on Wednesday the 13th of May, between 9 and 10:30 UK time, it's live and you are allowed to call me. It'd be lovely to hear from you and I can put you on the line with Dennis. So Dennis, you've had some really interesting comments and thoughts. You've generated a lot of interesting ideas for people. We're coming into the sort of final sort of section of the show, when we begin to catch up really in terms of what your current interests and your future plans are, and to hear from you about the work as you understand it at the moment, and what your dreams and hopes for of the future. So we've heard something about your work. What we haven't heard is the research side of things, and I know you're a very keen researcher in sort of in psychology. What's your interest there in terms of why do you find that quite important to you?
My research area, and I've written a number of research articles, is mainly on expressive writing, which I mentioned earlier, and also promoting resilience, and also the psychological effect of blogging. And in the future, I would like to do a research about trying to address suicidal ideation in terms of having mental health blogs as a form of intervention. And that's what I'd like to look into. I'm also interested in other non-psychology stuff. I'm interested about social media. I'm interested about web design, and I have an obsession about fonts.
About phones, did you say?
Fonts, like
fonts. Oh, okay.
Arial, Roboto.
Okay, that's interesting. Maybe we'll go to that. Maybe we'll not. We'll see. Our sort of obsessions are maybe the thing, but we'll see. If I would sum that up, I would say that you have a really sort of keen interest in these online spaces and online worlds, social media, websites, blogs. What's driving that interest? Why are you sort of interested in those types of areas?
It's because of me being introvert. I really thrive on working on my own. Before I took blogging seriously, I had normal jobs. I was a university lecturer, and then after that, when I first came to this country, my job was working for a PR agency. I was working for marketing. Well, I could sort of, for lack of better term, I could sort of fake it. Working for a PR agency, you have to be really bubbly and personable. I could fake that. But I'm more comfortable working on my own. I'd rather work on a quiet place. And so that's why.
This whole lockdown thing must be absolutely heaven for you.
It's not really heaven, because although I'm an introvert, I prefer to, eat somewhere nice. And that's something that you could not do.
Are you saying your kitchen's not somewhere nice? Okay.
No, right now I survive on pasta and pizza and takeaways. And thank God we have the patience to queue for 2 hours in Tesco.
Yeah. So tell me, as a psychologist, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the media about online spaces being bad for you. Clearly, you don't think that. Clearly, you think that they are positive. They have a positive impact. What are the sort of positive impacts? You've alluded to it.
I wouldn't say that social media is all good, but I would say that the good bits of social media outweighs its lapses, its disadvantages. Okay. First is because social media allows us to have conversations about mental health. That, you know, we wouldn't have this in the 80s. We wouldn't have this in the 90s. I was born in 1982, and growing up, we don't really talk about, you know, we don't really talk about depression. We don't talk about domestic abuse. We don't talk about toxic masculinity. But it's something that is now in the open, that we get to talk about just because of social media. And that's mainly because, you know, in social media, you can be anonymous, and so people are more confident talking about their narratives. And also,
it's just, I think there's something about social media where it's very democratic.
Yeah, it's very democratic.
Not hierarchical at all, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, but Twitter is also, because I mainly use Twitter. Twitter is also could also be quite divisive, especially when it comes to politics. And that's one thing that is really sad about social media. It could be quite depressing sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, we lost you there. We missed that bit. So,
oh, sorry. What I'm saying is that social media is.
I'm just going to continue, and hopefully he will unfreeze. James is listening.
Yeah. Am I back now?
I actually think it's Noel who has frozen, because I can hear you, right, and you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I actually think it's Noel whose internet has gone down.
Yeah.
So,
tell him to pay the bills.
Yeah, I'll make sure he pays his internet bill, that's for sure.
Yeah.
For those of you wondering who are listening, by the way, I'm James, the technician. I'm here when things go wrong, and obviously
told him to pay the bills. Sorry. I did not mean that in a bad way.
We all like a bit of humour. I'm just going to reach out to Noel now and see what's happened, because something's not gone right with him. Hey, Noel, so it's something's happened on your end, because I'm still with Dennis on the show talking. I think your internet must have dropped or something. What should we do? Shall we carry on talking until you get back? Will do. I'll handle that now then. Cool. I'll call you when I'm done. Sweet. Blah, blah, blah. Cool. So, as the technician foresaw, or something has gone wrong with Noel's internet. This is why you pay me, people, because I have this power. But so, unfortunately, we don't know when Noel's going to return. So we are going to have to, unfortunately, say goodbye for this week. But thank you so much for coming, Dennis. I've really enjoyed
inviting me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. You know, we all love you. Dennis, and you've been very, very.
I love getting invites from familiar people.
Oh yeah, and I mean, there's actually a little bit of backstory that I guess some people don't know, which is all three of us used to work together, didn't we?
Yeah, at Men's Radio Station.
At Men's Radio Station. Oh, I think Noel has rejoined us.
I'm here. Were you just taking us off air, James?
Sure. I will. I was just wrapping up the show because we're still on air.
Okay. Oh well, if we're still on air, let's just. Why don't I wrap up the show?
Go for it, Noel.
So I'm going to start my video. There we go, and just rename. Don't know what happened there, folks, but the joys of modern technology. We were just talking, singing the praises of online spaces, and then mine crashes. Such is life. Good to be back. I mean, we don't have that much time left, which is we're coming towards the end of the show. It's been a fantastic show so far, but we were just talking about how useful social media can be. I mean, you just started talking, Dennis, about how it can be divisive, but I was just about to sort of comment and maybe ask you a question about hang on, let me get my comments on. There we are. Sort of comment on this, because one thing I've done in the past, and I was thinking about this idea of that as more of an introverted person, you're quite attracted to sort of online spaces because of your personality type, which I get. There's also a clinical application, and I've done this with people who are more anxious and socially anxious. Things like Facebook and other forms of social media platforms can be actually quite therapeutic. And so I have, on occasion, encouraged clients to set up Facebook pages, for example, who find it incredibly difficult, even agoraphobic, to get out the house and find it impossible to sort of develop social networks because of their social anxiety. So I think there are definite clinical benefits around this, but I also echo that idea that you've begun to touch upon, that these are spaces in which conversations can happen that never happened before. And you mentioned things like toxic masculinity, for example, as a space in which we can begin to explore some of those issues and get those sort of stories out there. And you've talked a lot about stories, and I wonder if you, as we're getting towards the end of the show, can tell us why you think stories are important, because that's been a theme all the way through this evening.
Stories are important because they allow us to, to visualize what could have been and what should have been. And that's also true in terms of mental health, like what would have been if I do this, and what could have been if I didn't do that. And I think that's what stories are trying to teach us. And also, I think by nature, people are always drawn to stories, because we're social creatures, and socialization and interaction are always, tied in with stories, because you will always hear it from other people, how they interacted and how was their experience. So yeah, as people, we would always be drawn with stories. And we see different forms of stories in social media, in blogs, in resources.
It does seem to be sort of a very important part of human experience. I mean, it predates even sort of the written word and books and literacy, for example, that, early humans had very much an oral culture in which they passed stories on. Stories are very treasured, actually, in many ways. And I remember my training, one of our trainers was a specialist in stories, and she would always say to us that when we're using stories in therapy, we shouldn't change the words, that we should repeat the story exactly and treasure them and treasure all these stories. So it does seem to be a very important part of what the human experience. There's something about stories, I think, also, again, and coming to this theme I have about social media, is that stories are also quite democratic, that we all do have a story.
Yeah, because regardless of your class status, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of your experience, you always have a story. And we're all winners when we're telling our story, because when we tell a story, we're always the lead character, we're always the protagonist. So that that's a chance to highlight our successes, and there's also a chance to learn from our failures as humans.
Yeah. Okay, so we are coming towards the end. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I sort of want to use this time to sort of maybe draw some of the themes together, but also think about the future, and thinking about some positive things, and thinking about as we come out of lockdown, what sort of things that we can share with people to think about in terms of going forwards. We're looking at, collectively as a society, quite an uncertain future at the moment, and I wonder, what your experience, Dennis, is of uncertainty, and how you manage uncertainty within yourself, and whether you might be able to share that with people to give them some ideas around that.
I think the most effective way in trying to deal with uncertainty is to seek support, whether it's emotional support or financial support. Always realize that there are people who's willing to help you. And we just don't realize that that there's always people around us who's always willing to provide comfort, and who's always willing to talk to us. And I think we have to acknowledge that, and also just try to be positive. I know it sounds a bit cliche, but we really have to tap into that ability to, to look into the positive aspects of our experience. And that's one thing that I would like to highlight in this conversation, the importance of positivity and highlighting what we can do.
Yeah, and positivity, I think, particularly when we're in adverse situations, allows for the potential of growth. It's slightly different, isn't it, to resilience? Resilience is about minimizing harm, but positivity and growth mindsets accept that some things might harm us, but we can change and positively grow from that harm.
And that's actually what we call in psychology post-traumatic growth. Like a previous adverse experience could actually shape us into, promoting certain skills and promoting positive emotions.
So that's a really important point as we come. In terms of your future, what are your plans now for your future? What do you hope to be working on going forwards?
Right now, I'm supposed to be preparing for a conference that I'm organizing with a PR agency in London. It's called Good Mental 2020. Of course, because of the lockdown, we're still in limbo whether us to proceed with that event. But it's definitely going to happen in the future, maybe not this year, but next year. And I'm focusing all my time and energy to, improving my website. And more recently, I just wrote a book. It's called Let's Talk About Behavior.
Right.
I'm taking this opportunity to invite your audience, your listeners, to take a look at my book. It might be of interest to you. It's called Let's Talk About Behavior. Just type in my name on Amazon.
And tell us about the book. What's it looking at?
The book is actually a collection of essays that I wrote on a range of topics within, of course, the themes of psychology and mental health. It's more about, resilience, expressive writing, the things that I write about in PsychReg and in other publications. It's a collection of articles.
Fantastic. So that's available through Amazon, did you say?
Yeah, it's available through Amazon. And right now I'm also co-authoring a book with some academics in Malaysia. We're writing an ebook about resilience and coronavirus. It's an ebook. I'm co-authoring it with 4 other authors. Hopefully it will be available in the next 2 months.
Well, I'm certainly going to recommend it to people. I put the title in the comments section so that you can, people can look at it and they can find it on Amazon. I would certainly encourage people. I've known Dennis for a while. He's a great guy. And also, when you get to know his personal story, the sort of the challenges that he's come through and the life journey that he's had himself. And I think that we could all agree that we've all got a lot to learn from him about dealing with challenge and dealing with adversity and dealing with it with intelligence and humour as well, with a certain amount of grace. And if, I think it's maybe an aspiration of all of us to be able to deal with adversity with grace. So it's been a fantastic show this evening, Dennis. So we're really, really happy to have you on. The comments that we're getting are wonderful. It's been very interesting that people have felt very encouraged to make comments and join in. So that's been great. But the comments right at the end are from Goldie. I'd like to, thank you for your interventions. But she said, this has been a great place. That it's given me permission to relax. Fantastic.
And I think that's what you're hoping for, to make people feel good, and at the end of the day, they forget the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah. So we are just about at the end of the show. I want to thank you, Dennis, for coming on. Thanks, James, for your work. Sorry about the interruption when the Wi-Fi dropped out. Not a lot we can do about that, unfortunately. Just one of those things. Better than me just falling asleep. which I hate to admit I have done on occasion, but I didn't. It wasn't me falling asleep that time. It was actually a technical hitch. Thanks for everybody who's joined in. Great comments, great questions and thoughts that you shared with us. And I hope this sort of grows as that people get more comfortable with being able to take the risk of sharing their thoughts and feelings during these shows. So James, I think we're just at the end now. So I'd like to say goodbye to everybody, and I'll see you all again next week on Wednesday at 9 p.m. UK time. So thank you all very much, and bye-bye for now.
Thank you.